Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. David here. Today we're going to be briefly discussing the Tommy Tuesday practice tour, a big Reggie tournament with over 100 players in it. That was won by Habit. This is a HABIXXD. I'm just going to say Habit. Using a Zamazenta team. A question of the day: did Shadow Rider flop, or should this have been expected? I know you're probably thinking that was kind of weird. What are you talking about? So I'm talking about this. We're going to be talking about the winners and the losers of this tournament. And Shadow Rex was kind of a big loser. If you look at the standings of Shadow Rider here, 13th place was his best finish, which means there were none in top 8, none in top 4, none in finals, and only 2 of them made top 16, Joe UX9 and Tom Hayden, and those players are like cracked out of this world, right? So they might have carried the Calyrex into the top 16 finish. Look at his other placements, all the way down to from 18 all the way down to 122nd place. Now the reason for that might be a couple of things. It could just be like the over coverage of like hate on the Pokemon, pretty much, where people are over preparing their teams for it because they know how good it is. Kind of like the Xerneas effect, except it didn't really bother Xerneas much until like Worlds that year. But things happen, right? Things that happen like that. It could also be that because the mine is so good, it kind of happened with Incineroar in the first tournament when it came legal, right? Incineroar didn't have a great showing because everyone was kind of just throwing it on its teams. And when I mean everyone, it means like the good players had it, but the good players also prepared for it. And then a lot of players who are not as adept at the game also had it on their team. So it ended up having a lot of usage, but not a lot of winning. And in this case, Shadow Rider had 51 wins and 61 losses, 45% win rate, which is not ideal for it. But again, when a lot of those players are playing each other, your win rate sometimes does falter because there's so many of one Pokemon that head to head, it kind of splits the middle in a bit. So yeah, that's about the question of the day. But the actual tournament, let's go back to the standings. Won by Habit, using a team of Rillaboom, Incineroar, Raging Bolt, Pelipper, Fluttermane, Zamazenta. The team here is not like super uncommon in any kind of a way, I would say, because these are Pokemon that we all expected to be good, right? Like we expected the Incineroar and the Rillaboom to be 2 of the best support Pokemon. Fluttermane is going to be good because of the influx of Dragon. Raging Bolt is just a good Pokemon because it has stats like a restricted. It has priority. It has a lot of things that it can do. It can Calm Mind, it can Clap, it can Snarl, it can do whatever it kind of wants that your team needs. Pelipper is just good because of Wide Guard and Rain. It overrides opposing weathers. Wide Guard kind of just knocks away all of the opposing spread damage. And I think that Hurricane and Weather Ball are just really, really strong offensive moves, especially on a Terra Stellar Pelipper that we see here. This Incin has Will-O-Wisp and Flare Blitz. Notice a lot lately we've been seeing people like drop either their Flare Blitz for Will-O-Wisp. Yeah, kind of just Flare Blitz for Will-O-Wisp, right? Especially on these rain teams because they figured the rain is going to ruin the damage. But this is really interesting. I think dropping knockoff for Will-O-Wisp is actually really, really smart, right? Because usually what people are trying to do is knock off those clear amulets and then try to switch back in and out. But Will-O-Wisp kind of just cuts the need for that, like the time for that into 1 turn, right? You don't have to knock off and then get out and then get back in. That's 3 turns. Whereas this is just 1 turn click Will-O-Wisp. Yeah, it's not the most consistent move, but the fact that it's already going to take you 3 turns to do what I'm talking about anyway, clicking 1 Will-O-Wisp or 2 Will-O-Wisp is not the end of the world. Zamazenta being Terra Ghost is really cool because I guess not being able to fake it out and also not being able to intimidate its main damage is really, really good for it. It is a little bit strange that it has the Ghost typing, but I guess because you have the Wide Guard, you're not that worried about Shadow Rex. Not to mention, this is a booster energy flutter, which is probably speed booster, so you can probably slow it down or just shadow ball it before it can do anything. Either force it to Terra. If you force it to Terra, all of a sudden you can hit it with Behemoth with your Behemoth Bash, right, for super effective. So the team covers itself really, really well. The team is, like I said, nothing too out of this world. Interesting move sets on a couple things, like no high horsepower here. Interesting Terra Stellar for extra damage on Pelly, but generally not too far out of this world. So we're gonna look at the metagame here. This is just the Swiss rounds only, right? So the highest usage restricted was Shadow Rex Cali Rider, using 21% of the, taking up 20% of the field. It is interesting that the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Pokemon that were ahead of it were all not restricted Pokemon, but it kind of does make sense because you can only have like 1 restricted on your team versus like, obviously you can only have 1 of these as well, but more people can copy this versus more people are going to switch up on their restricted and use kind of the similar support. Like these first 6, you take 5 of them, slap your restricted on, you kind of just have a good balance team. Incin, Rilla, Urshi, Torn, Amoonguss, Bolt. You just pick 5 of them. You have a really good balanced team. Incineroar being at 75 out of like 100 and whatever it was is actually pretty insane. It has a 60% usage rate. That's really, really out of this world. It's not super unexpected because Incin tends to do its best in restricted formats, but with the advent of like Clear Amulet, you would think that it would be a little bit harder to work with in a sense, but it just doesn't matter what you put in front of this mod, especially because the top 2 restricteds in this tournament at least are Shadow Rider and Ice Rider, and Incin just has a positive matchup into both of them. So it kind of makes sense that it's here, right? Urshifu, probably Scarf if I had to guess. I don't think this gives us the information, but if we clicked a couple of random Urshifus here, this one is Scarf. This one is Scarf. Yeah, so Scarf Urshifu is just really strong, right? Because you can outspeed everything in the format just about. And use that to get off really big damage into stuff like the Shadow Rider, for example. You can U-turn out on Ice Rider. You can get big damage on Terapagos, which is the 3rd highest use restricted. Let's actually look at the restricteds in order. Shadow Rider was 1, Ice Rider was 2, Terapagos is 3 with 11% usage, 47% win rate. Calyrex Ice Rider had a massive, like for 17% users and a 61% win rate, is probably pretty insane. Kyogre was the 4th most used, which is a little bit surprising. You'd expect to see like Koraidon in that spot, but actually Groudon is there. If you haven't seen Moxie's Fraud Watch video, go check that out. We talk about Groudon a little bit. Yeah, I expected Koraidon to be higher. Zacian's pretty low also, because I think it's like really good. And Zamazenta is also really low compared to like Lunala. Once again, check out the Fraud Watch video for us to hear us talk about Groudon and a couple other restricteds that are on the clock as far as results are concerned. So we're going to compare the usage of day 1 here to the top cut bracket. So actually I have a better view of that. Here we go. 2 elimination. Let's make that bigger. So what we have here is the mods that essentially made it to top 16 cut, I want to say. I think it was top 16. So yeah, the Incins 13 out of 16 were had Incineroars in Amoonguss. These 2 kind of just get used to them because they just give you a lot of board control and they give you switch-ins, right? They switch into a lot of the restricteds really well. Incin switches into both Calyrex really well. Amoonguss switches into like Groudon's ground type moves really well, switches into Kyogre, switches into Miraidon's electric moves. Like they just give you really strong backbones of your team. So if you have a poor lead and you have one of these in the back, you have a way to reposition yourself. So kind of just get used to those. Raging Bolt being so bulky as it is also gives you a lot of just utility because like I said, it has Snarl, Electro Web. So I expect to see a lot of Raging Bolts as well. So now if you go to the restrictors though, if you notice, like I said, Calyrex Shadow Rider went from like the #1 restricted to the 3rd. And even then there was only 2 in top 16. Whereas the Calyrex Ice Rider had 4 in top 16. And we're going to go look at top 8 in a second as well. Terapagos had 2. So Terapagos was tied with Shadow Rider. Calyrex Ice leapfrogged it. Groudon also had 2. So shout out to Groudon kind of trying to fight the allegations. There was a Wigglytuff. 1 Zamazenta. No Zacian? 1 Kyogre? No Zacian. That's interesting. So 1 Kyogre did make it. I think what the metagame is showing us is that like consistency is kind of key. And what does that mean, right? So Ice Rider has this consistent 120 base power spread move. It also has consistent survivability. Like this mod doesn't go down as easily and doesn't always need to pop Terra as much as your Shadow Rider may need to. Incin and Amoonguss are 2 of the most consistent mods ever. Raging Bolt is probably the most consistent mod of Regulation F. Urshifu is very consistent damage. And Rillaboom gives you consistent like board control with Fake Out, U-turn, and terrain, as well as consistent healing, right? Tornadus is not consistent in its damage, but it's always going to consistently get a tailwind. Pelipper is also really good in his role of Wide Guard, and Futtermane is one of the probably the most consistent Pokemon of all of Scarlet and Violet. So as we start to go down, right, we start seeing things that are a little bit less consistent. That made it like the Shadow Rider, like I said, with all the hate, it's going to be forced to adapt a little bit. I think it's still going to be an S tier mod. It's just going to be forced to adapt a little bit. I don't think it's a bad one by any stretch because that would be insane. Zacian can be a little bit inconsistent with the number of resists that it has to face, like Incin and Ripe Strike Urshifu. I know it's a fairy type, but people don't really run its fairy type stab. So it can be a little consistent with that. And then having to get up the Swords Dance to mitigate the Intimidate boost. And then having to run Terrace to try to block either Wisp or Sleep is kind of hard for it, right? So I can see why it's not like popping off really high, but 2 in top 16, whereas it was very low use, is pretty good. Lugia, I don't know what it's doing here, but it made it. Somebody must have. Can we check the Lugia team? Chance Hines. You, my friend, are a madman. So, okay, this kind of makes sense. You have the way to give it back to multi-scale. You have screens, wisp, and taunt. So the team is cool. I think low-key, most of these teams that you see like this, though, are going to have the tropicals here. Lugia is not something I expect to see cutting events very, very often. As if anything, there's actually a big Victory Road Tour coming up this weekend that is going to probably be more reflective of what the metagame is going to look like into bigger events, because it's going to be a very big, highly contested event. So look out for that. But yeah, Lugia, I don't expect to see as cutting many events. Maybe just one like this, but still. Yeah, Wigglytuff is fake. Wiggly, that guy Jimmy, shout out to you getting 4th place. You're a goat for getting Wigglytuff to 4th, even if it is fake mon, because that means you are even better than we might be giving you credit for. Mienshao is another mon that we thought would be a little bit better. 1 in top 16 is not bad, but even then, like outside of that, 31, 30, 30, 100, it's a Pokemon that we thought would be a little bit more consistent. We'll see how it plays going forward. I guess the issue with Mienshao is that it's kind of just like predictable. Like you kind of know what Mienshaos are going to look like when you're going into your team builder. So it's kind of easy to mitigate that. And as I mentioned, Mienshao Cali Shadow Rider unironically loses to opposing Mienshao Cali Shadow Rider because the psychic damage just goes really well into it. And if you Terra Fairy, they both can't hit each other. So it kind of just becomes like a bit of a weird stalemate. So I can understand why it's not doing that well yet, but I do think as some better players start to develop the game, it'll start to uptick. So let's go ahead and look at the top 8. So in the top 8, we have 1, 2, I want to make sure I got them all, 3, 4. We have 4 Ice Riders. So right now we kind of just have to default to Ice Rider being like probably the best overall restricted. And that might have something to do with why Zamazenta won the tournament and why Zacian came in second, right? Because they both have very positive matchups into Ice Rider. Zamazenta with the Iron Defense body press stuff. Once you get up an Iron Defense and you're steel typing, you really can't get touched by what's it called? By Glacial Lance. And with the Ghost, I think Ghost is a good typing because some people, no, not a lot of people, like myself, has teched on like close combat just to deal with some of this stuff. But Ghost kind of blocks that also, right? And Water's another good one, which also kind of walls out Cali Ice a little bit. And then like even Zacian just does so much damage into it, and it forces it to Terra pretty much every turn. And on the turn that it does like Terra, you can sneakily get up a Swords Dance, and then all of a sudden you are +3. If you get intimidated, you're at +2. If you have your own Incineroar, you can stop them from faking you out, so you can get your move off, and then you can start hitting for +2 and +3 Sacred Swords, which still hurt because it's neutral into all of these Calyrex Ice forms you'll see, Calyrex Ice Terrors that you'll see. So it kind of makes sense that those two kind of came in first and second. It's also very ironic that Zamazenta came in first and Zacian came in second, because it's still like the Bayasta, which is better right now, with Zamazenta taking like the early lead. But yeah, so that's the tournament itself. Let me know what you guys think of these results so far. Do you think this is kind of like the direction the meta is going to go? Do you think it's kind of just like a one-off thing where the tournament itself has very, very iffy results with stuff like Wigglytuff and Screamtail both getting into like top 10 placements? Do you think like the Victory Road Tour will have like a better representation, or you think it'll be just more of what we already see here? Let me know in the comments below. That's all I got for you guys for now, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.